One. And we are live with Shane Watson. Thank you so much for being with us today, CEO and President of SBSI. And I'll tell the public and the followers what that means. So, this is a solution to provide, expert consulting services for essentially human capital management, total cost of ownership, uh, giving management actionable insights to make decisions, whether it's restructuring, downsizing, expansion. Tell us a little bit about you, Shane, and what is SBSI?
Great. Well, thanks, Rebecca, for having me today. And Shane Watson here. I'm the president and CEO, as Rebecca said, of Strategic Business Solutions. We're a U.S.-based consulting firm. We've been in business for, I want to say, about 22 years now, and have done probably 18,000 studies within our protocol for what we do. So we've seen just about everything in the industry and have a wealth of experience in helping companies evaluate their current human capital footprint and kind of figure out what makes sense to either stay the course or make changes to technology and people and strategy and all of those type of things. So delighted to be here and talk about what we do and hopefully what we share today will be inspiring to somebody and give some folks some ideas of how they may make things better in their organizations.
Yeah, so you're providing solutions, 20 years of being the head of SBSI, mostly US, Canada, and now expanding into global, more than US and Canada, essentially EMEA. But the concept is assisting organizations in documenting their movements in terms of human capital management. Tell us exactly what that means, how you provide them that support.
Well, I think first of all, kind of understanding why clients approach us and why we do what we do is kind of important to that. So, either someone is on very old technology that needs to be updated. Most of the work that we do is helping companies kind of come into the next century with their technology. There are a lot of dynamics that happen where companies acquire one another and you end up with multiple systems, and decisions have to be made on how to consolidate those applications and get to something that works overall for multiple organizations. Or companies simply outgrow the technology that they're on and they need something that's a little bit more robust, a little bit more enterprise driven. Or they just simply don't like what they're doing. They're not happy with it. They have bad service levels, or, a variety of things kind of drive these changes. So conceptually, what we do is, first of all, before we can help companies understand if there's a return on investment in decisions that they might make, we feel like kind of a first step in that is documenting the total cost of ownership and getting a really good handle on the costs that are being spent today in the organization and how those costs interplay with one another, how they relate, whether it be, technology versus labor. I mean, if we have poor technology, we usually have a lot of labor being thrown at situations to compensate. There's situations where maybe we have poor service levels in the field, and so managers are required to do, transactional based things to interface with HR and those kind of things, instead of doing the jobs that we hire them to do, which is, work with potential customers or create widgets or whatever those things are that would be more productive for them. So, obviously, if you just think about it, it makes sense to understand total cost before you talk about return on investment. It's hard to say if you make a decision that changes one of those variables that you're going to save a percentage against a number if you don't know what that number is to begin with. So we kind of feel like step one of our process is documenting that total cost and helping the executives and key decision makers in the organization understand what those are and how they relate to one another.
So you help them automate data collection as well? Because I think that's the first pushback you might hear from them. Oh, well, that's too work intensive, this data collection that you need us to collect? No, no. So how do you address that?
Well, one of the unique things that we bring to the market is we have a proprietary based web-based software that we have built, and we've been improving on and developing that application for the last 20 years. Obviously, it's based on a very solid recipe for collecting total cost, but we're able to actually deploy those to our clients via the web so that they can access those internally without any special thing other than a web browser.
Mm-hmm.
We typically conduct some training. We have help desk support that helps them as they complete those surveys, and we're kind of set up on a 9-pillar strategy where we can look at payroll, time, HR, recruiting, compensation, benefits, learning, performance, anything that kind of touches that human capital management realm. And we can set those different pillars up depending on what they want to evaluate in terms of scope. And then, we can collect the data for the most part via the web, and then produce our reports off of that, and then, align with vendors downstream to do the ROI piece of it. So we
It's
try to make it as easy as possible to work with us.
Yeah, it's do you assess first the situation and then give them maybe a because they might be surprised with the data and the findings that you bring to them and even deny no, this can't be us, right? You you put them in front of findings that are surprising or suspected or unsuspected. And then perhaps you automate, I suppose, the sales piece by identifying, okay, this is where you need the most support. Maybe it's
Yeah.
do
So,
you
a
yeah.
lot of it, depending on how we're brought into the different clients, a lot of times we're brought in by suppliers, vendors who recognize that, this work needs to be done to make a good strategic, effective decision. Sometimes we're hired directly by companies that need to do these types of initiatives. And when that happens, there's a little bit more consulting on the front end. So you might have some strategy work, decide if you're going to do total outsourcing or in-source
Mhm.
services. I mean, kind of defining that HRIS strategy definition, if you will, whether it's related to global payroll or domestic payroll or those type of things. So
Yeah.
it can kind of take multiple shapes, but we are set up to do that type of consulting on the front end. And then I think the good thing about what we do through our survey base is when we collect the information and report it's really the client's data. So if there are things that are, questionable or don't look right, we
Yeah.
revisit those points. And usually what it comes back to is they haven't given us the right information, or,
Yeah.
they need to rethink some of the data entry that they've done, and we make those changes very easily within our application to get that data very comfortable.
Typically, they're taking decisions on a sort of guessing. What do they have when you arrive? At first, what do you encounter? What's the typical setup? They're using their Excels and their
Yeah, well, there's a variety of different things that they use for platforms.
yeah.
Obviously, those different pillars that I described, but the way our data is collected, we have a cost structure that we call it an element of cost structure. So part of it is, different buckets of labor that touch things that happen in an organization. So processing labor, like, the payroll team and the HR team and the
Mhm.
benefits team, and what are the costs of those resources and what they do. How many technology people are touching the different applications from a support standpoint, and what does that cost?
Mhm.
We also look, as I mentioned, at the field labor to see what the cost burden is on managers that have to, interact with the human capital model. So, what does it take for me to do a performance appraisal in terms of time investment? How do I audit time? Approve time, schedule things, am I handing out physical paychecks to employees? A variety of things there that we kind of measure.
Hmm.
So it's very specific in terms of the data that we collect. We also collect all the potential outsourcing costs that they have, their budgets, overhead, facility, cost of brick and mortar buildings to support people. All of those kind of things get kind of brought in. So
Hmm.
it's very directed at actual cost. There's not a lot of guessing that goes on, other than they may, I guess, forecast some of the field labor, but most of it's very accurate and comes right off of the P&L. So that when we pull it together, it's highly accurate in terms of its data quality.
With your tool or without? I mean, before you arrived, it's
Yep.
still. So if it's already accurate, like what is it? The visualization, like seeing all that data interacting. That's the part that really makes them wow.
Well, I think the real value to it is bringing a cost structure to the table that allows them to collect all the necessary variables to determine total cost. And, kind of having a lot of experience in this industry, we feel like when companies try to do that themselves, they don't look at everything. An
Mhm.
executive might look at payroll, for example, and go, well, I have three people over there that make 70 grand each. So I multiply that by three, and I know I pay my software vendor or supplier 200 grand a year. So I have, a 400 grand cost.
Yeah.
And they don't think about all the supporting technology. They don't think about the field labor. They don't think about, the budgets that are in place, some of the outsourcing pieces that are being paid for. And then in
Mhm.
addition to that, there could be, error rates and controls that could be off. They could be non-compliant in some areas. So bringing a structure to the table that helps them get 100% of those costs documented and create a good footprint that reflects that's invaluable. And I think that's what we do very, very well. I mean, we bring that to the market in a structure that companies don't have to recreate, and that's the real value.
And who's a good candidate? A company who's about to restructure or who just restructured, or because everyone is transforming, at least here in Europe.
I think everybody's transforming, and
Yeah.
even if you've transformed and done recent implementations on one area, chances are you have five others that you need to look at later.
Mm.
So if we bring in a 9-pillar structure, I think the worst thing that can happen is you learn about your organization, and it helps you kind of strategize and prioritize things that you need to tackle to start checking those things off the list to make them more compliant and more functional and, just better overall.
Do you have an industry of choice, or you can? I mean, everyone has HR and finance. That yeah, the
No, it doesn't really matter. I mean,
yeah,
over the course of our
cross-functional. Yeah.
we've done studies across just about every industry. I mean, we see a lot more than others. I mean, manufacturing, healthcare, food services, retail sales, or
Hmm.
some of the high markers. We see a lot less forestry and agriculture and those kind of things, but we have done
Yeah.
all. So it doesn't seem to matter what the industry or size of the employer is. Our structure kind of fits into small companies as well as very large companies, and we've done studies on companies that are as small as 500 employees and as large as 100,000. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
That's some dashboarding solution for this.
a lot of
Oh
stuff.
my God, the data. Okay, so when it comes to data input, and you said you offer this as a service, right?
Uh-huh.
As well. So there's no excuse. We have no barrier to entry and engaging with you, truly.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It's just that we document that total cost, and then there's next steps that happen as well that I think are important to understand. And so once we get that total cost footprint put together,
Hmm.
usually there's an RFP that happens, or the company kind of has to decide who they want to pursue in terms of suppliers.
Hmm.
And most of those suppliers want to do some analysis, to figure out how to size the deal and what to put forward in terms of solutions. And services, and those can look differently, depending on each client. But once they kind of engage and are able to do that sizing, they can come back to us and give us, a good articulation of what the service model is. They're usually able to provide the price points along with that. And then we have the ability to take that total cost of ownership data and set it up in a structure where we can then forecast return on investment against the different cost markers. And that's where I think the rubber really hits the road. You kind of have the vision of how different decisions you might make might affect overall cost depending on what services and technology and things that you bring in the door to address some of your challenges. So,
and then when you have that vision, that clarity, what happens next? Are you helping them rethink the strategy, or you just drop that report and run?
No, again, it kind of depends on how we're engaged. If
Yeah.
we're brought in by a vendor, a lot of times they're only looking at that single vendor, and so our work is minimal.
Yeah.
If we're brought in independently, we could be running the total, RFP
Yeah.
process and helping them do the vendor selection and all of those things.
Yeah.
So we have different consulting services that touch different points depending on what the clients need. But at the end of the day, we build that return on investment and, produce very nice reporting that shows that and helps them understand how the total cost pieces are going to change and how they're going to become more efficient and where the challenges are going to be. And
Yeah.
so, there's many pieces that are kind of flying around this depending on the prospect. But,
And you follow them through the process, or is that like a punctual? I suppose you revisit the numbers yearly. I mean, what's the once a client, always a client? How?
to be honest, Rebecca, we'd like it to take that shape because we think we could get some tremendous data
Yeah.
out of that. But the reality is these implementations are very taxing and time consuming. And unfortunately, what we find is once, a vendor is selected and they go through an implementation, there's not a lot of palatability to go back and study it all again.
Oh,
But
I see.
go,
Okay.
we're ready to move on. But I mean, our firm would love that. I mean, we
Yeah.
would love to go in every 2 years
Yeah,
and,
to have,
and
yeah,
do those things. But
to check again, how is it going? Keep it
I
healthy.
think
Yeah.
more and more the client support mechanisms that are in place with some of the major vendors kind of take over at that point and start to kind of drive some of those efficiencies over the course of the contract. And while we'd love to come in and do that as a secondary step, we rarely get the chance. We've done it a few times, but not as much as we'd like.
You're really end to end in the sense that you not only present the dashboarding, but input the data there, and then we'll even help with the vendor selection if there's a need to rethink that piece, or the software solution that they're or the partners that they have in place. So how long is that process, more or less? Depending, I guess, on the structure of the company, the size, right? But
Yeah. Well, so as we sit in the market today, we can approach things in one of three ways. So because we have done so many of these studies, we have a very rich database that kind of gives us, information about
that's another business model.
about companies of size and companies of industry and companies using a specific platform. So we can run some analytic data that will tell a company, here are 50 companies that use this vendor to process payroll like you do, that are in your common industry and have your common size.
Yeah.
And we can produce those reports kind of based on our total cost structure.
Mm-hmm.
So while that was intended to support software suppliers, we're finding that works more and more as an ROI. A lot of companies will look at that sales summary and go, that's really all I need. I mean, you're showing me results of 50 companies that look and feel like I do.
Mm-hmm.
The averages of savings are probably going to mirror what I'll experience, and they feel like maybe they can present that to their board and it's good enough to get the project approved and launched. More often than not, it's supporting data to other things that we do. One of the big challenges that we have as we go into organization is there is a little bit of fear of how employees are going to react to us being there.
Yeah.
Whenever you bring somebody in and start asking questions to a payroll team or an HR,
Yeah, you sound like an auditor.
seems to be a little bit of panic that takes place, and people fear that employees are going to leave because they think change is coming. So
yeah.
We try very hard to keep ROI and total cost separate, because the total cost exercise is really an audit exercise, and it can be pitched to employees in the nature of, we're just documenting costs and understanding where we sit and trying to understand our current footprint, and it's really not threatening to anyone.
Yeah.
But there are different challenges that our prospects have, and so we, to do it right, we feel like our detailed study is the best way, and those take about 2 to 3 hours per pillar to fill out a survey and build those, but they're very specific to the customer. They're very detailed in terms of the data.
Mm-hmm.
The ROIs that come out of them are very specific and very solid to those clients. But there are situations where they say, hey, we just don't have the bandwidth to accommodate 2 to 3 hours in time to do these studies. So we have created some express models as well that kind of rely on our database a little bit to make some assumptions. And, we ask a little bit different question set to the prospects, might be of a nature of, describe to us how well you're integrated, and they drop down a box and pick, things are highly integrated down to everything's almost manual. And depending on what they select on those questions, we bring data back from our database to kind of help them make decisions. And those surveys take, maybe 6 to 8 minutes to complete. We can produce an ROI very fast. So we're trying to accommodate, most of what we see in the market in terms of being able to help customers with a total cost and an ROI, depending on what they're able to do and what kind of time they have to do it, frankly.
And comparing to the competition, to other regions, in the same industry, and you're also equipping them to, speak to their boards and shareholders with this data that is so clear and visually probably very pleasant as well. I mean, I've seen the product, so I remember.
Well, we do a lot of support in presenting those results too. I mean, because as consultants, we live in our environment. We understand our numbers inside and out, and it's hard to, no matter how intelligent a CHRO might be, or somebody that's sponsoring the study, when you pull all that data together and put it on their plate and say, now go explain this to your board, it can be a little daunting. So we try to support that process all the way through, and I would say probably 95% of the time it's us as consultants with them as team members and partners presenting to their executives, which makes it a little easier for them.
So 2 questions. Where is your time most spent in this process? Is it the data input? Is it this part of, advising them with the board and shareholders? And also another question, is it also, when is the right time to use you? When we start, when we're about to restructure, when we just restructured? What's the...
Yes, and yes. And, probably the better answer to that is when is the worst time. And the worst time is when you've already made a decision. I mean, we're not a silver bullet. We can't go in and undo mistakes that have been made. So I feel like the best time to engage us is early in the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. You're evaluating things, the earlier we get in, to help with that and supply the consulting and the technology to help pull all of that together, it just makes for solid decision makings downstream. But we get brought in all over the place. I mean, vendors will bring us in and say, we've been working with this company for 6 months and now they need to build an ROI. I'm like, well, that should have been done 6 months ago, but it takes all kinds of shapes and forms, but really, the earlier we're in, the better we are.
And where do you spend the most of your time is data collection, I suppose, right? That's the time intensive, very
Well, so for us, there's kind of two ways that we deploy the data, and obviously, COVID brought about some challenges. I mean, we used to do a lot of on-site work, and where that wasn't possible during COVID, everything took more of a virtual shape, like everything else.
mhm.
Our surveys are really designed for companies to respond to us virtually.
Yeah.
But it's increasingly hard for people to carve out time. I mean, if you're a payroll manager and you have to run payroll and you have to deal with all the issues around that, it's hard to carve out time to sit down and take a 2 to 3 hour survey.
Oh God, yeah,
So
yeah,
one of the things that we find works very well is if we go into organizations and do a structured day with breakout sessions. So we might go on site for a day and
yeah,
spend 8 to 10 o'clock with payroll and collect their data and then send them back to work and then bring in benefits and do theirs. And so,
yeah,
in response to your question, where do we spend our time? It's probably on site doing those type of things with
yeah.
clients that, and in a day we have it done versus if we do it virtually, we could be a month out going, hey, are you going to do the survey?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's when you can be more productive face to face and
it's always
totally.
productive face to face to do
Yeah,
it, help them do it. And
yeah,
when we walk away a day later, the reports are produced and everything's good,
yeah.
and they can make their decisions easily. So
Okay. So, more questions for you. What are currently the main challenges? I think I heard you say, well, people feel uncomfortable. We show up. What are we doing? Are we preparing to restructure? Are we facilitating that? Who's getting fired because of the data that you're going to show?
right.
So, yeah, do they see you as a partner? Do they see you as a threat? Maybe that's one of the pieces that you're challenged by the most.
It is one of the pieces, and I think it comes down to how we're positioned in the space.
Yeah,
I mean, if you go out to your employees and say, hey, we're making this huge change, and some of you might have jobs and some of you might,
yeah,
here come these guys, it's going to be perceived as threatening. If you communicate it as, hey, we're trying to do the best we can, we want to be as efficient as we can, we want to make sure that our employees have tools to do their jobs more easily. This firm
yeah,
come in and audit and help us understand where some of those opportunities to improve are, then it goes very well. And we've become very good early in the process in coaching our clients on how to do some of that internal communication and
yeah,
help with some of those strategies so that it's not perceived as a threatening thing. But that is the biggest challenge, that and time.
yeah,
I mean, time's always a challenge, especially with HR people. There's not enough of it in the day to begin with. And when you start asking them to do things that are outside of the normal, it's a bit of a panic. And so,
And how about others that are doing what you're doing? Because you seem really unique. I mean, I've seen other firms, and I've met other founders who offer yeah, dashboarding solutions, but I think the data input part was always missing. So maybe that's what makes you so special in comparison. If I compare to your competition, or what
yeah,
else?
we spend some time evaluating who our competitors are, and I'm not sure there are any that do directly what we do. I mean,
Hmm.
there are some, big five consulting firms that come in
Hmm.
and do ROI and evaluate organizations.
Yeah,
It's really less technology focused and more consulting focused. It's usually about 10 times more expensive than our approach because you're paying high dollar consultants to come in and kind of create the model on the fly. And our stuff is very baked and it's a very good structure. And so we're able to do it more efficiently and more streamlined. Um, and then there are some competitors that do things in spreadsheet type formats, send you, I'm not going to name who those competitors are because it doesn't make sense, but you can buy different templates for them to, do ROIs and that kind of thing. But as we've evaluated some of those work pieces, they're not specific. There's a lot of assumptions, things like that. So I really do think we're unique and very in a niche in terms of the way we approach total cost and ROI. I'm not sure there's
Yeah.
anyone who does it like we do or has a like model.
Yeah, it's really unique. At least I have not come across this, because I remember we were discussing with you and this head of HR, and then he voiced his concern with the data collection piece, and you said, well, actually, that's also taken into account, and so he had no more argument. So that was a great. I didn't know that this was also part of the solution, and I think this is something that will be great for people in and outside the US. I mean, if you're planning to expand to Europe, yeah, I don't know if you've scanned the market here, if you have any preference, any industry, any country, or how about languages? I suppose you have different currencies that you can play with. Are you ready for the international? How are you tackling
Yeah,
that?
so there's been some really interesting things happening over the last 3 years, and one of them is the emergences of some very effective global payroll solutions.
Okay.
And up until about, I would say 3 years ago, that's been a real challenge for software companies. They haven't been able to really deliver anything that works globally. But now there are. And so you see things, SAP's got a great solution.
Mm-hmm.
ADP with their next gen product, they're able to bring in multiple, global payrolls and give you consolidated reporting. I think Dayforce claims to have something. I mean, there's a lot of suppliers that are really getting into that global payroll market. And so we have seen the need to expand and to get into Europe and do some of those things. And so over the past year, we've spent, probably upwards of $500,000 to $1 million in our applications, making them ready to do that. So we're able to deploy our surveys in multiple languages.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, we support most of the languages in Europe. As clients fill those out, they can actually complete them in their home currency. So they
Yeah.
can complete them in euro dollars or Mexican peso or,
Yeah.
Brazilian real, whatever they need to. And then we actually have the programming in place where, if we're doing studies for multiple countries under one company umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
we have the ability to hit a table and convert all of those currencies back into a common, whether it be euro or US dollar, for consolidated reporting across multiple countries. So we're prepared to do that, and that's kind of our focus this year, is to try and get into some of those European markets and start to do some work outside of the US and Canada.
Okay. Awesome. No, and I suppose you also supported companies in the US who are global and who have data from other countries. And if you're targeting, so who is your? I want to help you connect with people here today. People are going to be watching us. Who are we targeting in terms of business leaders, head of HRs? Who are your business partners? Your account, who are you usually? Is it the head of the firm, the founder? Is it the
I,
CIO?
I
Yeah.
would say it's rarely the head of the firm or the founder, but we love that if that's the case. I mean, that's
Okay.
where the buck stops. And so the higher we can go
The better.
through our alignment, the better. But I would say 90% of the time we're dealing with a CFO that sees the need financially for change, or
Yeah.
a CHRO who has come into an organization and gone, wow, this is not what I'm used to and what I've seen at other organizations. We're really backwards and we need to come into the
Yeah.
new millennium. Or, a lot of times IT people spirit. You might have a head of IT that goes, this is just taking way too many of our resources. We know there's a better way to do this. And,
Yeah.
with outsourcing the way it is now, we could take a lot of this off our plate and free up resources to do other important things. So I would say it's usually the CIO, the CEO, CFO, or the chief human resource operations person that brings us into.
To
to
Okay.
yeah, and those are very good alignments because they're all good solid decision makers with some authority to
Yeah.
kind of push things through the organization and align where needed.
Yeah. Um, well, I'm thinking about other potential questions, but what are the because you said we just invested and having different languages, different currencies. What would be the next step? Maybe integrating AI to this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been thinking about that a little bit. We don't think
Yeah.
that we don't think that AI is quite ready for that yet. It is
It's
actually,
the AI that needs readiness for this. Yeah.
but it is something that's constantly on our radar that we're
Yeah.
evaluating, and especially on the data side and how analytics happen, because the AI is very powerful in that arena. I think the biggest thing for us is to get some experience in the European market so that we know how to pose questions, quite frankly. I mean, because, U.S. payroll has some very unique things.
Yeah.
There's different W-2s and tax forms and garnishments and things that happen that are very unique in the U.S. markets.
Yeah.
That's also the case in benefits. I mean, the U.S. still is operating with insurance companies that are, doing most of it, where most of Europe probably has more of a social type benefit structure where you don't have to deal with those insurance companies as richly as we do in the U.S.
Yeah.
So when you start to collect information with those considerations, we have to ask questions differently to European markets around payroll, around benefits, around those things. And so we've already started to do that.
Yeah.
We've created ways to do it where in the U.S. we might, ask a question around a specific W-2 tax form. In a European market, it might be, the required tax forms that you need to fill out, more, type language than a
Yeah.
very specific form. So we're kind of maneuvering those things and making those surveys more palatable to those markets. And
And data security might be a bigger concern in Europe, perhaps.
for us, security is really solid. I mean, we use Amazon Web Services, which is, they're the biggest company in the world, and they supply data security for companies a lot larger than we are and in a lot better fashion. So we're very comfortable with our security. It is just more getting the experience in the European markets and being able to tune some of those things as we go through that to make it, more efficient, more palatable, and better.
Mhm.
And experience naturally brings that. You get feedback from
Yeah.
prospects that you work for, and we're able to. We have a very nimble technology, so we're able to make those changes just quickly, overnight in most cases, sometimes within a half an hour. So we can modify our survey bases and calculations and all of those kind of things very nimbly, and we just think that's going to be important as we kind of get into those different areas.
Yeah. Um, no, I mean, this is really exciting. I'm thinking this year you should be here, and I say here, Switzerland, Europe,
Well, we
um,
sure hope so. I mean, we
supporting businesses. Yeah, because
hope for opportunities to do that.
it is a time of restructuring and transformation for many reasons, whether they're downsizing or whether they're digitalization, automations, yes, but also integrating sustainability or getting AI ready. It's all transforming somehow, right? It's all part of that. Like a transformation partner, that's a good branding for you guys to come in and be to facilitate this transition, or if you want to change vendors and justify this, you can be sold in different ways. I'm just thinking about how to market this here.
There's a lot of drivers for it, and I think as I kind of think about it off the top of my head, one of the biggest challenges people have in the human capital marketing, management arena is they don't generate revenue for their companies. They're a necessary thing to run the organization. They reduce risk. You have to be there to hire people and manage employee issues and those kind of things. But a CFO who has to make decisions about where to spend money is probably most certainly going to focus on how do I improve profitability, not how do I add more HR people. So the real play for HCM is to be as efficient as we can. Make sure that we don't have waste, make sure that we're as effective as we can, make sure that we're providing tactical ability rather than, uh, you know, reactive ability. Those kind of things become very important. And I also think the retention of quality staff is something that's really starting to come to the forefront. I mean, in the U.S., we're seeing situations where there's not a lot of people coming out of college that want to process payroll. That's not their dream. They want to do other things. A lot of them want to be HR people. And so, where you don't have an unlimited amount of payroll type people, outsourcing starts to be, a little more important than insourcing because you have backup to processes. And if a key person leaves, you're not stranded, all those kind of things. So I just think there's a lot of things to be considered that we really help, bring to the forefront in terms of making HCM as best it can be and as efficient as it can be and as risk avoidant as it can be, if you will. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shane. This was for me. I have much more clarity now how you partner, how you help businesses transition into new solutions in a cost-effective way. And yes, there's a focus on human resource management, of course, but it's more the interaction between the cost of hire and the cost of operation, and it's not so clear. It's I mean, I run a very tiny business, and already I am sometimes confused as to whether or not I need to increase my. Should I hire more people? Should I get more clients? Should I maybe hire a clone of me? All these decisions we make them sometimes from informed guesses, really. So having this solution could be really game changing for business leaders to justify themselves, also share the risk, share the responsibility.
Sure.
For hiring decisions, I think you also can factor that into your solution.
Yeah, recruiting and onboarding is part of
Yeah,
it.
recruiting. Yeah, I'm thinking about recruitment because that's where I come from. To yeah, to be so very data driven, and not just from my intuition. I can be quite creative with my data, with my decision making process, but I love what you're bringing. I can't wait to see you in this market and to facilitate your entry. Yeah.
Well, I certainly thank you, Rebecca, for having me on a forum like this to give us a chance to get the word out there. And I really appreciate your efforts in doing that. It's been a pleasure to participate today.
Thank you. You're starting your day. We're about to close here.
We're
But yeah,
going to have lunch here in the U.S. So we're pushing 10:46. But
so I hope you have a good rest of your day. And this is going to be distributed on LinkedIn, but also saved on YouTube. So if you missed it, you can watch it later. It's recorded and it's saved there.
great.
So
Well, we look forward to talking to whoever's interested. So come our way.
yes. Oh, they will ping you. You will be probably approached on LinkedIn and harassed, hopefully.
That's fine. That's what we want. That
Yeah.
makes for a good day. So we welcome that.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much, Shane, and I hope to see you in Europe very soon.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.